separated your deep ball from everybody else?
My deep ball, it has a little secret sauce to it, man.
Never get too high, never get too low, but just keep moving.
The whole story is Carlos never beat me in any kind of sports in high school.
Now, you said some nice things about the Bengals, but I really want to ask you about the Bengals defense. And you can be honest about it in terms of your projections for the Bengals defense and where you expect them to finish in 2021.
It's going to require, I think, a little bit of – it's certainly going to require some progression from players. Hendrickson, I think, is not as good of a player as Carl Lawson. I think Larry Ogunjobi's a good player. DJ Reader's a good player. At the linebacker position, you need quite a bit of work there. Not necessarily you don't need to acquire players, but you need players to step up. Linebacker, though, is one of the least impactful positions on defense, and so I kind of appreciate their approach the last couple of years of sort of drafting those guys and hoping like some subset of them develops. Where I think where I think things get a little bit interesting is looking at the defensive backfield because. Jesse Bates, full stop, is one of the best defensive backs in all of football. You have him commanding the defense. If you add to that, like what they got Von Bell last season from New Orleans, an okay football player. They got Ricardo Allen from Atlanta, who, has played well at times. I think is probably best suited to be a third safety and sort of like a base nickel type of thing where he's kind of replacing a linebacker, hoping Von Bell can fill in on the run. You look at cornerback, and that group has the potential to be a group you can win with, right? Like Eli Apple has had bad seasons. He's just like a lot of other corners. He's streaky, right? Like you lose William Jackson, who has gone, average corner to brilliant corner every other year, and you replace him with a guy who I think is just like a little bit less brilliant in his brilliant years and a little bit less average in his average years. And guys like Apple, guys like Trey Waynes, who I know, missed last season, but he's a very solid player. Mike Hilton's one of the, I think, most versatile and best nickel sort of inside guys in football. And then with Darius Phillips and Awuzie, you're hoping one of those guys ends up being good. And that's what secondary play is. Secondary play is very much, I got to find 5 or 6 guys that are reliable, and I don't really care who they are. And I'll give the Bengals credit on this as well. They've thrown numbers at the problem, right? Where you don't want to be. And again, this is where I look at Kansas City. Maybe this is a leak for Kansas City. I look at Minnesota. I think the same thing. When you say these are my 5 guys and I don't have a ton of depth, you leave yourself open to some bad play, right? If you put 8 or 9 guys that you're kind of comfortable with and you say, I'm going to let 5 guys emerge here as my defensive backfield, that's a good thing. And I think that helps. And in much the same way as I believe wide receiver play sets the table for offensive line play, I think defensive back play sets the table for pass rushing. I think if you can make the quarterback pat the ball because your secondary can take him off his first read, it'll make your entire pass rush better. We've seen that with the Ravens. We've seen that at times with Pittsburgh as well. And I think the Bengals sort of have that right idea in the sense of sort of building from back to front and taking a chance on Hendrickson, but mostly building a solid back 7 that I think can make some quarterbacks, think a little bit as opposed to previous years where they kind of had free access to open players.
In regards to the rest of the league, for someone that's sitting at home and saying, well, Awuzie and Trey Waynes aren't better than da-da-da-da, right? Mm-hmm. 2-part question. Looking at the Chiefs' early Pat Mahomes years, like when they would go, I think that first really good year went out early, right? Their defense to me was not even on paper, probably not what the Bengals are right now, right? In my opinion. But speak to, I guess, like the Kansas City Chiefs, the way that they kind of Pat Mahomes, their situation is what I call it now. Like how they went about constructing their rosters as far as their secondary and their defense, where they went. To me, it seemed like they went offense heavy first, and then let the defense kind of catch up throughout the years. And then the next part is, what do other secondaries look like compared to what's the cream of the crop secondary? Because there aren't many. Like when you look at Eli Apples of the world or Awuzie's or whatever, to me that's all around the league.
100%. I mean, you look at Kansas City, right? So Kansas City, when they were transitioning, so early on in the Reed era, they were very good. They had Brandon Flowers, they had Sean Smith, they had Marcus Peters, they had really blue chip talent in the secondary. And as they transitioned from Alex Smith to Patrick Mahomes, part of that transition was, okay, we're going to and this has some Bengals stuff written all over it. We're going to throw $16 million a year at Sammy Watkins to be our number 3 guy. We're going to throw a ton of money at Mitchell Schwartz. We're going to and we're going to let defense kind of just do what defense does, which is just oscillate year to year, right? Like you look at defense. Minnesota signed Kirk Cousins because they thought they're the best defense in football. And then it falls down to 9, and all of a sudden Kirk Cousins isn't good enough to get you over the hump because defense is just something. I mean, even the Bengals, 2015, I remember, I did a lot of Bengals games in 2015, and that team, with Darquez and Drake Kirkpatrick and George Iloka and Vontaze Burfict, Vincent, they were good. They were good defense. And the thing about defense, though, it's mostly about all of your players sort of being above a certain threshold more than it is eliteness, right? Like once Geno Atkins stopped being on a defense where the secondary was, competent, he wasn't as, effective because he had to cover. Like Jesse Bates is amazing, but I can guarantee you if the other 4 guys in the secondary are good enough, he could have 3 or 4 more interceptions this season because he's not covering up for other players' deficiencies. And I think that's one thing that I'll say about Kansas City that they I believe there are some issues. Obviously, I think the Frank Clark trade wasn't good and everything, but I think they understand that if you have a great offense, you need to find 11 guys and specifically 5-6 guys in the secondary who just don't kill you and don't take huge gambles. Don't take humongous swings of the bat. Find 11 guys for modest prices that won't kill you. And that's tough to find around the league. You look, to me, I think that the standard for secondaries in the NFL, you either have to look at Baltimore with Peters, with Marlon Humphrey. I think it's one of the best players in football. But they lost Earl Thomas last season, and it's a little bit creakier back there. We saw some deficiencies. You look at Denver. I think Justin Simmons and Jesse Bates are kind of in similar classes as far as safeties in the NFL. But you look, they got Ronald Darby. They got Kyle Fuller from the Chicago Bears. Bryce Callahan's one of the best nickels in football, and they used a top 10 pick on Patrick Surtain Jr. So that to me is a defense where you have 4 corners who can all start, and if one guy gets hurt, you're not going to get killed. And if one guy sucks, like if one guy has a bad season and you have to take him out, you're not kaput. And another secondary, I know you guys aren't going to like this because they got William Jackson, but I do think Washington's going to be pretty good. They got Kendall Fuller, who went to Kansas City, won a Super Bowl, went back. They got Cameron Curl at safety. They got Landon Collins at safety as well. I think they're fairly solid as well in the defensive backfield. Like you said, though, every other team, they're just praying. They're like the Bengals. They're just praying that some subset of 5 or 6 guys works out. And that can certainly happen. And we've seen it happen. But it's tough. Tampa Bay is another one. Tampa Bay spent a lot on their secondary and in terms of draft picks. And a lot of them hit Carlton Davis, Sean Murphy Bunting, Antoine Winfield's son, all that. It's a concerted effort there. And I think the Bengals, to their credit, have made a concerted effort. And even when Wayne's got hurt last year, Alexander got hurt, that you saw the bad end of variance. If those guys stay healthy, Alexander's gone. But if Wayne stays healthy, then I think you're starting to see the makings of a good defense.